What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the VPYA podcast. It's been a minute, man.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a weird hiatus for quite some time.
Yeah. It's good to be back, though. Yes. This week, it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
Just me, Christian. What's up, everybody? And
I'm Matt. Nice to see you guys again. And those of you first time, nice to meet you.
Stick around. We're talking about some good stuff. So if you are unfamiliar with kind of how things work here on the podcast, we are a part of VantagePoint Church. We're specifically VantagePoint Church in Eastvale. Did you know that there's another VantagePoint Church? I think it's in like Placerville, California.
What?
Yeah. So if you are from VantagePoint Church in Placerville, California, this is the wrong VantagePoint Church, but welcome. We're glad you're here.
The fact that there's a Ville after it too.
Yeah, right?
It's like Bizarro World, like
Vale.
Vale. Yeah. I mean,
close enough.
Yeah.
And I think there's one in Australia too.
Really?
But VantagePoint Church, like there's not many out there, you know?
It is pretty unique to be, named VantagePoint.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that they named the church VantagePoint back when they were just meeting at a high school and there was like no good view. Like Eastvale is also like the flattest city all around us.
That's so good.
But then they bought a property that it's got such a good vantage point.
Which is like, come on now.
Come on.
That's God right there.
Look at God.
Yeah. He's like, oh, trust me. I'll give you a church to match the name. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was perfect. All God.
Yeah.
But we specifically lead the young adults ministry here at the church.
Yes.
And so every Tuesday we get to hang out with a group of young adults and dive into God's word. And it looks a little bit different each week, but we go through these teaching series, and recently we've been walking through this teaching series all about rest.
Yes.
And so Matt, how you doing with rest, man?
I'm not gonna lie. Right now, as we're doing this, I'm a little tired, so maybe I could, catch up on a little bit of rest. But I mean, hey, as far as sleep-wise, but making sure there's purpose in the days that I do have rest, not sleeping rest, but just rest in general. I think following this series that we just did, it actually impacted a lot of my life. Yeah. So yeah. How about you? How's your rest been?
Yeah, man. It's been good. Yeah. One note on you, actually, before we talk about me.
Okay. All right.
Is I thought it was so funny that every time we come in for the podcast, or every time we had come in, I feel like you kind of had a pretty open day on the days that we would record.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it was like you would come in like pretty relaxed and pretty mellow.
Yeah.
Today it sounds like you have a jam-packed day.
Yeah. And
so,
that was the lack of preparation.
Yeah.
I have something after this that I forgot about, and it's pretty important too. So yeah. Okay, my mistake. Yeah, I came in here head first, dude, trying to help get all this ready to go. But
the one podcast we do on rest, you're like, this is the least rested I've ever been doing a podcast before.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. But for me, man, I'm feeling good. So with kind of everything that we've been talking about in this series, I feel like it just kind of brings a little bit more to the forefront of your mind that, hey, I am feeling, busy. I am feeling burdened. I am feeling these things, right? The things that we talk about on Tuesdays, man, this is me. This is how I'm living, and something maybe needs to change. And so for really just kind of like this past week, I'd say my wife and I have been starting to implement just like our mornings have been a lot more restful.
That's good.
We'll talk more about Sabbath in a bit.
Yeah.
And I think Sabbath is kind of what we hope to get to and really hope to like, practice consistently and just see God do something through that. But for now, what that looks like is just every morning so far this week, we wake up and we kind of do our devos together on our in our backyard.
That's good.
And just let our dog kind of run around for like maybe an hour, 30 minutes to an hour.
Dude.
And it's just like such a sweet way to start the day that like doesn't feel hurried, doesn't feel rushed. You're spending it like in community with someone that you care for, and you're spending it with God too.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's been making more of a difference than I realized that it was in the moment.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's awesome, dude. You said you have an hour time in that in your devotionals, like you guys just spending time together with God.
Yeah.
What time do you guys wake up in order to be able to allow that? I mean,
We are up at 3 a.m. No, I'm just kidding. So it kind of differs every day.
right on.
Since a lot of my like work on Tuesdays, Wednesdays is in the evenings, right?
Oh,
because
okay.
we do services for Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I kind of take those days a little bit slower. And so the mornings are a little bit more open. So we'll usually kind of wake up around like 7 or 8 and then like hang out outside for about 30 to 40 minutes or 30 minutes to an hour. But and it's nice. You know, I've been like going through this devotional on Proverbs. And so I've been reading that. She's been going through this devotional that I recommended to her just on the names of God, which is super fascinating. Like,
yes.
Yeah. I think we're actually doing a series maybe at the end of this year in YA on the names of God.
I think you're right. I think you're right. We are. Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So it's just been leading to really good conversations between her and I. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, just really sweet time with God, you know. Taking time for prayer in that as well. Yes. So it's been cool.
Yeah. That's cool, dude. Yeah. That's awesome,
man. Okay. So one of the things that I kind of wanted to do on the pod today was there were 3 messages in this series, right?
Yeah.
I took the first week, Sarah took the second week, and you took the third week.
Yeah.
So I kind of just wanted to break down each of those for anyone who maybe, you know, saw each of the messages and like us kind of need a recap, because even when we sat down saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, we were like, what the heck did we teach on, man?
It comes with age too, you know?
Yeah.
You start to forget things.
So we will kind of walk through each of those, just kind of refresh our minds. And then for anyone who hasn't seen them yet, you know, this is hopefully a taste of what that message was actually about. And so you can go on YouTube and, you know, find the rest of those messages, or, you know, just listen to us.
Yeah, get the synopsis of all 3 messages. So.
Yeah. This is really the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's also stuff that I think both of us at least had in our messages that we wound up cutting for the sake of time.
For time.
Yeah. I think we talked about that before on this podcast, that this is really like the cutting room floor where we get to bring in stuff that didn't make it into a message.
The director's cut.
Yeah. Call us Zack Snyder. Speaking of, man, I'm excited to see what, I don't know what, I guess Zack Snyder made me think of James Gunn because James Gunn took over the DCU, but I'm excited to see what the DC movies are looking like. Yeah,
man. He's got a whole roster already ready to go.
Yeah, Blue Beetle coming out later, like in August.
I'm pumped.
It'll be good.
The suit looks so cool.
All right, so week 1 was my week, and we got to talk a bit about, it was really kind of like laying the foundations of the series, right?
Yeah.
So talking about the current culture that we live in, and the fact that really it's not a culture that's defined by rest. It's actually a culture that's defined by hurry.
Yep.
Let's talk, before we dive into more of the message, can we talk about that for a minute? Just like, how have you seen our culture, our world, our lives, even just you and I individually, how have we seen that play out in this rest versus hurry kind of battle?
I mean, I can say I witness it every day in traffic on the freeway. I mean, you know, people are cutting you off, people are maneuvering to go to the place that, or their next place that they're going to from where they just come from. And I think that's like a huge, you know, example showing how much of a hurry we are in this world, that we're just trying to go from place to place and, you know, trying to get there in a hurry. One, probably because we're running late, you know, so, but I think like that's for me, that's what stood out right when you asked that question. I was like, dude, traffic, especially because I just came from traffic. So I was probably that guy, you know, like, dude, this dude is just driving crazy. So,
Yeah, man, I have some pretty crazy driving stories, and it really shows, like, I think our impatience and our
most
hurried hearts show
most definitely.
Kind of almost like the most when we're behind the wheel of the car, which is crazy because what an unsafe place for you to just like give into this hurried spirit, right? But yeah, man, I mean, I've had people like, you know, flip me off. I've had times where I've been like, oh, if I wasn't saved.
Lord, help me, please. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I got to give it to Jesus. Yeah. But it's crazy, man. Yeah, I see it in driving, and I also see it just kind of in like the in our attention spans, right? When it comes to, I think we live in the most hurried time in really, I would say all of human history. And I think a big part of that is due to like the technological advances that we've seen in our day and age versus, anything that's come before us.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any secret, and I'm sure that there's probably a billion people who've talked about it before us, but just the impact and the influence that social media has had on our attention spans is like detrimental.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Especially like being a youth pastor, I see it in like a lot of students, right? That like ADHD is now like it's huge, man. I feel like there's almost like 90% of the kids that we have are like,
most definitely.
Oh, I have some form of ADHD, and I'm like, all of you though?
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Have you been diagnosed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really is a result of how they spend their time just throughout their day, and our time is spent just scrolling.
Yeah.
And if we don't like something right then we move on to the next thing.
Yep.
And so I think that plays out in a few different ways in our lives. But I think definitely technology and the influence it's had on our lives is one of the big ways.
Yeah. That's like probably the biggest way. And then you're talking about patience when it comes to technology. Remember dial-up?
Yeah.
Remember having to wait for that? Like, dude, we sat there waiting for that. And now I can't even imagine myself having the patience to sit waiting for that dial-up to connect. Like, it's just crazy how, and again, in our lifetime, we're able to see the differences. But now I don't even know if I can go back to what it used to be. And so technology, I agree with you, man. It's a huge breaker.
I hate to say it, but I do think that dial-up may have been before my time a little bit.
Oh, really?
Just a little bit. I think because I mean, I have older siblings, right? And so they would always kind of be the ones on the computer and everything. And so I think by the time that I probably hit like junior high, that's typically when I started going on the computer for like internet and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think by that time it was past those days.
Got it.
Okay. Like 2006.
Got it.
Ish.
I forget, man. I forget our age differences.
Yeah.
You're just so wisdomous, You're just so wisdomous that I forget, You just got a ton of wisdom on you. So, I mean, that's a good thing, though.
Yeah,
that's
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so so this is kind of the way that we see it play out in our world today, right? That it's in traffic, in technology, even I kind of talked about this in the message, but even if you just kind of break down your day or break down your list of responsibilities for students, it might look like this, that they have classes and then they have homework and then they have sports and then they have clubs and then they have, some of them, the older you get, you begin to get jobs and then you get, you have your home life stuff that you need to take care of. You got your chores that you need to take care of. And then on top of all of that, if you're in the church, you're expected to be there like once, if not twice a week.
Yeah.
And then you're serving and then you're praying and then you're reading your Bible. And now we throw Sabbath at you and all this stuff. And it's like, it's a lot. And that's just for high school students.
Yeah.
And then it's one of those things where it doesn't really go away when you hit young adulthood.
Nope.
It actually just adds more on top of that, right?
It increases, yeah.
Yeah. And then you even add just other pressures that the world puts on you or other pressures that your family puts on you or even unfortunately like other pressures that the church can put on you at times, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, not only do you need to deal with the busyness of work and school and family life and friend life and trying to have your own life too, but now you also need to find your wife by spring.
Yes.
Ring by spring, right?
That's true. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's pressure, man. It's not just hurry, but it's this pressure filled life that we live.
Wow. Yeah, that's facts, dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when we kind of going back to the message, so we laid that out, right? That is the world that we live in. We live in a hurried life. But we also want to take a look at what Jesus says and what Jesus did.
Yeah.
And so when we take a look at what Jesus taught and how he lived, we don't see any of that, right? We don't see the hurry. We don't see the pressure of, trying to live according to outward influences. We actually see Jesus just like the best word for it is rested, right? We see Jesus at all times, even in the midst of like crazy situations, he's at rest.
Yes.
How does he do it?
Right? I mean, he's Jesus, So I think, man, like you're right. Like in all these different circumstances that he was in and a part of, you see his disciples breaking, and he's just like, no, just relax.
Yeah.
Like when they were ready to arrest Jesus, who was it that chops
Peter.
And he's just like, whoa, like and it's like it just shows how much patience Jesus had, and it even shows today because he has patience with us. And like I'm probably, if I were to watch over me and I was trying to take care of me, I'd snap every minute, like bro, like sit down, dude, relax. But the fact that he has so much patience with us, and it's awesome, dude.
Yeah, it makes me think that like really patience comes down to an issue of trust, right? And so much of this life and how we live comes down to an issue of trust. I mean, think about when Jesus and his disciples are on the boat and the storm comes and Jesus' disciples are freaking out. We're going to die. Oh no, this is the end. Jesus, wake up. And Jesus wakes up and he's like, why'd you wake me up? They're like, Jesus, there's a storm happening. Like, help us, right? Like, do something. Is there anything, right? And Jesus he calms the winds and the waves. And he says, why did you worry, right? Like, why didn't you trust that if you're with me, you're going to be okay? And so I think it shows that, like, okay, Jesus, why was he able to be so patient? And why was he able to live a life of restfulness and just this peace, right? This inner peace that he had. I think it's because he trusted in the sovereignty of his Father. And like I think that's how we're called to live too, right? Like on one hand, yes, like Jesus was God and is God, and so there's that natural trust that like he understands the sovereignty of God better than you and I ever will. Because he is it.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, like, what a lesson that is, that even when he was here, like, dealing with the pressures that you and I face, right? I mean, scripture even says that Jesus was tempted in ways that we were tempted, right? That he can empathize with us because of that. But even in the midst of that, he still trusted that God was sovereign.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it lets me know that, hey, restfulness goes back to, do you trust in God's sovereignty, right? We closed out that message by talking about a few things that Jesus taught and a few things that Jesus did. Jesus, he lived present in the moment, right? We see that story of him on his way to heal Jairus's daughter, and this woman kind of reaches out. This woman who's been experiencing bleeding reaches out, grabs his robe, and Jesus doesn't like chastise her, doesn't condemn her. No, he says, your faith has made you well, right? And so Jesus took the time for inconveniences, which, like, I don't know the last time that I was actually like happy about an inconvenience.
Seriously, and willing to stop. Because he was on his way to already do something, and the fact that he just like, wait, hold on, I need to tend to my daughter here. Like man, like you're right. What if I needed to go somewhere, and especially if it was trying to, in the task that he was in, if I had to do something even remotely close to that, would I be able to stand stopping for someone else, knowing that someone is waiting for me right now? Like I need to. That's just it's remarkable, man. Just wow.
It makes me think of I got this buddy, Trent. Shout out Trent if you watch or listen to this. But Trent's the guy who, like, whenever you go somewhere with a group of people, I feel like there's two types of people. For me, I'm the type of person who stays with the group and is kind of like, oh guys, we can't leave yet because like we're waiting on this person. Like I'm trying to keep the group together.
Oh, okay.
Trent's the kind of person who leaves the group and is like impossible to find. And he's just like,
I can totally see that.
Yeah, he's like, if I get lost, like I'll catch up with you guys at some point. And there's just like this peace with it.
Yeah.
And as much as I hate it, and like as much as I want to be like Jesus, I feel like Jesus is probably the person who's like, why were you worried about me?
That's true.
Like
That's
I
true.
was exactly where I
That's
needed
true.
to be.
That's true.
Yeah.
I could totally see him doing that.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah.
But I think it's a trait of Jesus, to be honest.
Oh, for sure.
We talk about this in the message as well, that Jesus, he taught restfulness and an easy yoke. We took a look at Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30, where he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, right? So Jesus is teaching, hey, I want you to experience rest. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It's almost like this. Jesus loves to deal with what I feel like is unfair trades, right? That we get his righteousness, he gets our sin. How unfair is that? Even here, he's after, this understanding that like, hey, I'm going to take on your sin and you're going to take on my righteousness. He still is able to say, and I don't just want your sin, but I want your burdens too. And I want you to experience my peace. Like, that's crazy. Jesus teaches an easy yoke. He teaches life to the full. This is one of my favorite passages of scripture, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Fun fact, we'll be talking about that in our next series. Our next series is going to be all about spiritual warfare, so make sure you come through for that. But then he says, I have come, Jesus has come, that they may have life and have it to the full. I love that verse because I think, and Matt, you can maybe speak into this too, but I grew up thinking that Christians had horrible lives. And not in the sense that like, a lot of bad things happened to them. I just think that they had boring lives.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's fair.
I just thought that they like had lives that I was looking at them. I was like, I would not want to live their kind of life. I'd much rather live the life that says, hey, I can do whatever I want and, have a blast and do whatever. Right. Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, no,
think the same thing?
Yeah. There was a moment where I thought the same exact thing. I was thinking like, man, like you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Can you go? No. Well, what can you do, bro? I mean, like, are we just gonna have to just? I saw this a lot also too in the comparison of like thinking like a child, right? Like it's dinner time, but you want ice cream, and you can't be given ice cream because you gotta eat dinner first. Like that's like kind of like the Christian mentality.
Yeah.
As a kid, we think that's the worst thing in the world because no, I want my ice cream.
Yeah.
But if you really think about it, like, no, you got to get your nutrients. You got to do good first, and then you get and then you get, what you earned later, And I think it's kind of like the same aspect. We're thinking like children in that sense of like, man, like, I want to go do all those things. Those things look fun.
Yeah.
But are those things good for our soul?
Yeah.
Are those things good for us? So, yeah.
Dude, that's such a good way to put it. Yeah, we really, how quickly, even as adults, do we have the minds of children?
Yeah.
And not in the like childlike faith way.
No, yeah.
But in the way that says, oh, that looks fun. And the parents around us are like, no, that's dangerous.
Yes.
But we're like, no, but it looks fun.
Yeah.
I don't care if it'll hurt me.
Yeah.
I don't care if I can die.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even sometimes today, like I'm thinking of something like, man, like that looks fun. Like, I mean, nothing bad, but just I want to, go skydiving or something. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know, like, is that something I should be doing, Or, hey, I want to go to this concert. Yeah, but, maybe the things that are being spoken in these songs, are they good for my soul? Are they worshiping God? Are they, So yeah, it's I think again that comes with the whole. Oh, well, we'll get into that, the technology part of it.
Yeah.
But, so.
Yeah. Talking about concert, it made me think of like raves, right? I don't even know if raves are still a big thing.
Me either.
Yeah, I remember like being fresh out of high school and like seeing all my friends going to these raves, and part of me, there's part of you that looks at that and you're like, oh man, they look like they're having such a good time.
It looks fun.
Right?
Yeah, it looks fun.
But then like being, a Christian and kind of just knowing like, okay, putting yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
Could you go through it and could you experience it and could you have fun with it and not fall into sin? Yeah. But is it wise?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Is it wise? And I would argue no, because you're putting yourself in a place where if you know that there is sin happening and you fall into sin, well, then you're just a fool because you went where sin is where sin is, just rampant.
Yeah, exactly.
And you fell into sin and now you're like, oh no, how?
Yeah. Why me? Yeah, no, it's like, I'm totally on the side of you because it's like, it is possible to be able to go there and have a good time and do it in a Christian-like manner. But again, it's like you got to have like the faith of God in order to be able to be 100% sure that you're not going to do anything remotely close to sin by going to places like this, and not even a rave, but just places that are of this world and don't, in a sense, like, worship God in these environments or these events. I think, that thing's a big one. But again, like you said, like, but it looks fun. Yeah, it looks fun. But, I don't know. It's kind of a tough one because I definitely wouldn't want to put that trust in myself of knowing like I'm going to volunteer myself to be put in this environment and know that I'm just going to have a great time and not do anything. And not only that, I think because there's some as far as like attire, what people wear at these events too is like that in itself is like, my gosh, bro, like, nah, maybe you should not go to this place because so
I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think it shows, hey, how we thought when we were kids of, hey, this Christian life, like, man, Christians just don't know how to have fun. Christians are just boring.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the heart of what Jesus wanted for his followers.
Yeah.
I think Jesus wanted them to have lives that were lived to the full, the fullest, most enjoyment-filled, most delightful lives possible. And I think he knew something that we need to understand, and that is that type of life does not come through sin.
Yes.
But it comes through abiding in him, and it comes through just learning to, rest and learning to be obedient to how we were created to live. Yeah. Right. So we talked about that, and we talked about abiding. If you guys want to take a look deeper into that, you can check out the message. But it's John chapter 15 where Jesus talks about, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you, unless you abide in me, you will bear no fruit. And so, just then talking about that whole idea of what it looks like to abide and how that kind of relates to rest. And so, again, if you want to hear more on it, take a look at the message. But the second week was Sarah's week.
Yes.
And so we got to hear from her, coming out of this part where we were talking about, okay, what is the current landscape that we live in, and how does that compare to how Jesus lived? Sarah got to talk to us about some really cool practical steps of how do we actually live that kind of life that Jesus lived. Yeah. And so she started off with the story of Mary and Martha. Are you familiar? Do you remember that story enough? Do you want to take us through that?
Yeah. Quickly? So Mary and Martha, they have Jesus over as a guest, and one of them is running amok trying to get prepared for the dinner they're about to have, and the other is sitting at his feet. And so Mary is the one that's
Mary's
like,
sitting at his feet.
She's sitting down, and then Martha's the one that's like running amok. So like Martha's telling Jesus like tell Mary to come help me, like, like she's just sitting there, not doing anything. But in reality, what Mary was doing was what is supposed to be like what we're supposed to be doing, we can get caught up in doing all these busy things, and there's nothing wrong with doing things at the moment, because what she was doing was preparing a meal for Jesus, so she was technically doing something for Jesus. But I mean, in that sense too, you can also lose your way of being with Jesus, I think. In that kind of so
Yeah, because Martha essentially tells Jesus, or this is in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. In verse 40, she says, "Lord, don't you care? Don't you care, Jesus, that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me," right? And Jesus says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things." Does that sound like maybe you, if you're listening to this right now? You are worried and upset about many things,
Yeah.
but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. I love that. He doesn't condemn Martha for being worried and for being upset over all of these things. In fact, like, what she was doing was good.
Yeah.
She was being hospitable for the benefit of Jesus.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we all would.
Yeah. But in that, he actually says that what Mary's doing is better.
Yeah.
That Martha, maybe rather than stressing about all of this stuff that's going on, maybe you should just kind of take a seat next to Mary and be comfortable just sitting and resting and learning and abiding in me for a minute, you know?
I think that also too can be a projection of rest and patience, because she could have easily sat next to Mary and they could have both been with Jesus in that moment, and then they'll get to the food part, you know, like, oh, we'll get to that, don't worry, like, just come over here. But it's, again, that whole mindset of constant going, there's no rest, and I need to get this done, we need to do that. And it's like, just, you know, Jesus just like, just relax, like, you know, we'll get to that when we get to that. What is it, like that, we'll cross that bridge when it comes, kind of thing, you know? And so
Yeah, and then so Sarah, she, coming out of that story, jumped into 6 items that help us to make time to rest in Jesus. And again, I'm so grateful for, like, her practicality, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something that Sarah
helpful.
does so well, that she doesn't just, like, inspire us, but she's like, hey, I want you to be inspired, but also here's how to apply this to your life.
I want you to walk out of here with actually having something useful to apply to.
So she there's kind of 6 points that she gave, and maybe we can talk about a couple of our favorites, but she talked about setting a time, right? That you need to set a time to spend time with Jesus. If you're struggling with making Jesus a priority and resting in Jesus, then start by setting a time, some point in your day, some point in your week. That easy. 10 a.m. 9 a.m. 8 a.m.
Your call.
6 p.m., whatever. And then prioritize that time, right? So she talks about like what that time would actually look like, right? That you are not going to that you're not going to kind of show up to that time without, like, a plan or anything like that, or that you're not going to push that time, but that like that time is an important time that matters for you. So you're going to be ready for it. And you're not going to rush through it either. I think that's another big thing. And then she talks about setting boundaries with technology. Again, you know, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I think on one hand, right, we talked about the dangers of technology, the fact that it does kind of create this hurry culture within us. But at the same time, it can be used for good to actually combat that hurry culture as well. She talked about clearing your mind, and so just what that looks like to breathe, to kind of run through the senses that you have, right? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling?
Good.
What am I touching?
That was good.
The 5th one, whatever your 5 senses are, and then even like listening to worship, right? So what am I listening to? What am I soaking in to point me back to Jesus? And then the 5th one was take in Jesus. She talked about, like, sitting in silence, asking him to speak to you, meditating on scripture. So actually, like, not just having it be this mindfulness, but you know, you have the word of God right there with you. You have, you know, access to him through prayer. And so how do you not just kind of have this, like, yoga meditation, but how do you actually have it be focused on God, you know? And then the 6th one was protecting that time. And so she was talking about being consistent and, you know, not being being able to set boundaries with other people so that you are actually able to keep that time consistent.
Yeah.
So, of the 6, was there one, Matt, that kind of really just struck you as pretty crucial?
Man, it's hard to choose from all of those because they're so good. But I think the one that I probably would relate to would be probably the making the time, because I think that's a massive excuse that we use a lot. It's just, I just don't got enough time. I don't got enough time. But it's like, well, if you make the time, you will have time to be able to spend with God and, and be in that with him. So I think that was a good one for me. And then also too, like, it's like you call the time, bro, like whatever works for you. And I think it's like, it's even more of a leniency for us to have and not be able to use the excuse that I don't have time, because it's like, no, you're creating the time however it works for you. It could be the first thing you do in the morning, the thing, maybe something you do at the middle of the day, maybe there's something you do right before you go to sleep. You call the shots, you make the time, so that way it works for you every time. So I think that was like, for me, that's the one where I'm like, ooh, like that's good, because I always marked myself as like, I'm gonna do it the first thing in the morning, and epic fail. Like, that didn't work. It's because I'm not a morning person. So it's like, well, okay, maybe I need to try something different. Maybe, something in the middle of the day, but also too, like you said, keeping that intention of that while I'm doing this, making sure I'm not rushing in it, because this is not a task. This isn't just something else to mark off the list. Like, no, this is God time. This is separate from the list of to-dos throughout the day. So yeah, for me, that was the one that stood out the most. Yeah. What about you, dude?
For me, I think it was like protecting that time, right?
That's good, yeah.
I think it's easy to do it once, maybe even twice.
Yeah.
But once you kind of hit that third week of doing it, like, that consistency is probably the thing that's going to make the biggest difference in your life, but also going to be the biggest hurdle to actually keeping a habit in your life, dude. So just making sure that, hey, what I'm even seeing this with so this past year, and I'm like convicting myself a little bit right now, but this past year, me and a few of our youth volunteers, we've been getting together Saturday mornings at about 8:30 in the morning here at the church to just do prayer walk around the church, praying over the church, praying over the ministry, praying over specific students, and we had been pretty consistent with it. But man, it's so easy that, like, oh, you know what, I kind of got to do this instead, so like, I'll push that off to next week. And then same thing happens next week. Like, I think it's maybe been 2 or 3 weeks since I've done it, and that's just because I haven't been protecting it. I've been giving that time to other things, and it's convicting me, right? That, man, we need to just stay consistent with stuff like that.
Yeah, that's good.
So that was Sarah's message. And week 3, we swung things over to you to talk through kind of the other big thing that Scripture talks about, right? We talked about if we talked about our world, we talked about what Jesus taught and how he lived. We talked about how do we do that. But then there's this other part of Sabbath, right? That Scripture talks quite a bit about what Sabbath looks like and what Sabbath is and what it was created for and all of this, and even the biggest tension point for Jesus and the religious leaders at the time was Sabbath. So like, why was Sabbath such a big deal? How did it play into this idea of rest? You want to kind of give us the cliff notes of your message?
Yeah, so I talked about, like you said, the Sabbath and how important the Sabbath is, but also something that is not even quite seen as important today. The Sabbath was something that was not only, I feel, was something that God gave us a tool to use, but it was also something that he in himself gave an example of practicing the Sabbath. And then he also gives you a massive description of what Sabbath looks like. So I talk about, like how Sabbath was just like a holy day, right? In Genesis chapter 2, verses 2-3, he talks about, this is, when he's doing all his works on this 6-day time frame, he's making, the heavens and the earth, and he's, he's creating all these things, but on the 7th day he rests, right? And he rests. And so that is, again, I was saying in the message how that was his way of showing us like this is what it looks like to rest after you finish doing everything you've needed to do during, whether it's the week or whatever it looks like, during that day. Well, actually the week, not the day.
Yeah.
This, we gotta keep the Sabbath separate. So I think so that was one of the reasons why I believe, like, not only does God say that it's holy and it's blessed, but also the fact too that if he practiced it, then I mean, come on now, like we're not anywhere near better than God, or not even trying to even say that. So I think that was one of the things that was huge. And then also too, I think the Sabbath was something, like you said before, that it was a conflict that the Pharisees had with Jesus constantly, and they would basically persecute him because he was doing things on the Sabbath day. So there's like two aspects in that, because you want to practice Sabbath, but you also don't want the Sabbath to like run your life, I guess, in a sense. And again, that's what I shared in the message too. And so it's, the Sabbath was made for us. The Sabbath was made for us to observe. It was made for us to practice. It was made for us to be able to sit and be with God, and just to like, take in delight with him and stuff. So, yeah, man, I mean, the Sabbath was a huge one for me, especially like, I like the fact that you, put it like, hey, maybe you should talk about the Sabbath in this. And I love that you brought that up, because it helped me, I guess, furthermore my knowledge in Sabbath, and then also too connecting the dots, because I thought Sabbath was just a day off. It's just, you can go and just take a day off, and it's like, nah, there's so much more in that. And I think in the message and preparing for the message, it really gave me that growth of like, wow, I was doing this completely wrong. So
yeah, and I think that speaks to the fact that like Sabbath in the evangelical church today, I feel like it's kind of an underrated thing, right? That you and I, we've been going to church for years, and it's brought up occasionally. It's brought up kind of in seasons, but it's not something that I think if you look at the average Christian,
most definitely,
that they're really practicing in their life week to week. And I think part of that is because of we take a look at the New Testament, and we take a look at these religious leaders, and again, the biggest tension between them and Jesus was the Sabbath, right? And so we see lines like Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And when we see that, we think, okay, so Sabbath is a tool, but it's not something that like needs to be practiced, right? It was this legalistic thing that they practiced back in in ancient Jewish culture, but it's not really something that has value today. And it's like, man, you're missing it if that's your view on it. Because like, one, it doesn't matter. You talk about this in your message, but it doesn't matter if like God, commanded you today, right now, hey, you need to Sabbath, or not, because at the end of the day, Sabbath is actually something that God commanded from the beginning, right? That God, like, and on top of that, it wasn't a command just because God wanted to get something from you. It was a command because God wanted to give something to you. God was saying, you need rest, and I know you, and I know you're not going to do it unless I tell you to do it. So rest. Take a Sabbath. And to this very day, man, we make every excuse that we can to avoid it.
For sure.
And it's like, why? Like, this is something good for you. This is something that is going to change your life for the better. So why are you running from it?
Right there. This is something that's good for us. Why are we trying to run away from it? That is something where it's like, because it says too, if we're not practicing Sabbath and we're not seeing it as a holy day, then we're going to be put to death. And so it's, I shared too in the message that, okay, why would I want to neglect something good for me that God has given me, like you said, a gift, and allow that to put me to death? Like I don't see, like, it's kind of like, man, like I love coming up with examples and analogies, but it's like saying like, all right, we're gonna give you a car, and this car's not gonna have any brakes in it. Here you go. would you rather choose that, or would you rather choose the car that has brakes? And it's like, so it's that whole choice. To me, it just seems so simple. Like, it's like a duh kind of question, you know, it's rhetorical, where it's like, yeah, of course you need to practice Sabbath. And the fact that, you know, in today's culture right now in the Christian community, that it's like you said, it's not being talked about. And especially because this is something that needs to be practiced on a weekly basis. This isn't, you know, this isn't a Thanksgiving. This isn't once a year. No, this is something that needs to be practiced weekly. And we forget that how important God has made this, and how he's told us that we need to observe this as a holy day. It needs to be holy. So yeah, man, I mean, that was an awesome point that you brought up too. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I love what there's this author, Jeff Bethke, when he's talking about Sabbath, he kind of compares his Sabbath to like Christmas, right? Because even the word holiday actually comes from like the Old English, like holy day, right? That it's one and the same.
Yeah.
And so this holy day of Christmas that we celebrate, and all, like, think about the preparation, the excitement, the joy that goes into Christmas.
Here earlier and earlier in the year now. It's like January and there's already Christmas decorations.
Yeah. And so he's saying like the same joy and the same, you know, like preparation that goes into Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he does for Sabbath each week.
That's good.
That like his family, they treat it as a holiday that they wouldn't want to miss.
Imagine a holiday every week.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Christmas every week.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. And
that's
so
really cool.
There's like this excitement with it, right? Like, man, I can't wait for Saturday because that's my Sabbath, and that's the day that I get to rest, and like that's Christmas.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. And so I just loved his point on that. But I think going back to what we were talking about, you said it's so simple, and it is.
Yeah.
It is simple to know that Sabbath is something good for us, and Sabbath is something that we should be practicing.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, but every time I look at my week, I'm like, I kind of Sabbath.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I actually Sabbath.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Why? Why is it so hard to actually implement?
I think, if not think, but no, it's because, again, it's what we're surrounded on a daily basis, which is this world, man. This world that consumes us at times, and we fall victim to it every day, that we forget that the Sabbath is approaching because we get too distracted. And I share too in the message that the world is kind of like programmed us into machines, you know, and we're kind of like Arnold's out there and just like, you know, just like, be back. And so like we start
dominate.
And so we start trying to move that way. And when we're doing that, we're going to just end up going to exhaustion. And then even let's say we do make a day for Sabbath. Now we're too tired to even do anything on the Sabbath, and we're just going to take a nap. And we're going to end up, that nap turns into a 4 or 5 hour, sleep, dream state. And so I think that's really why, again, it's so simple, but why aren't we treating it as such, And I think it's because, again, the world that we're living in right now. So
yeah, I think for me, one of the difficult things is like actually making it's avoiding the Sabbath turning into a day off, right? So it's avoiding looking at my day and saying, oh, you know what, I've got tons of free time right now, like why don't I like knock out some laundry, because I kind of need to do that, or why don't I swing by the church and like take care of some stuff that I have to do, or why don't I do this or that, or even you know what, I'm gonna play some video games for the next like 4 hours. And
easy.
It's like, is God in that at all? No, it's kind of relaxing, I guess, but it's not centered on God. And I think that's the heart of the Sabbath, right?
Yes.
That it is a time where we delight in God, where we rest
Most
in
definitely.
God,
Yes.
where we center our thoughts and our hearts on God, not to the point where like we're just sitting in a room, just, like like you were kind of doing in your message.
Yeah.
But that we're like enjoying this life through the lens of thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
Yes. And I think that's the important part, right? That's the important part, to know that the day that you're spending in Sabbath is not a day off.
Yeah.
They're not one and the same. They're different. They're, you know, if again, I was mentioning that you brought up delight, and those are like some of the things that I was mentioning, where, you know, delight is what you do. Delight is what differs from a day off to a Sabbath, and that delight needs to be targeted towards God. You know, you got to thank him in what you have and what he's given you, you know, instead of trying to, like you said, catching up on laundry, or trying to like, oh, like this is the perfect time to catch up on, like, I don't know, an assignment that I'm behind on, you know, like a final I got to study for. I think this is something that we feel like, oh, I took a day off, but was it really a day off? Because you were still kind of working, bro. Like, you know, so you got to understand that Sabbath is things that you can enjoy, but again, like you mentioned, is centered in God. Like, and as long as you're doing these things and you're delighting in him, and you're again, we can even talk about the protection on that too. If you're protecting the Sabbath, you know, and you're making sure the Sabbath is not going to be interrupted by anything, I mean, that's something important too, to treat it again such like how God wanted us to see it, was a holy day, you know, a day that he blessed. So yeah, man, I think the Sabbath, we need to I mentioned too that we buried it, you know, as a Christian community. We've buried the Sabbath. Yeah, the Pharisees, I said the Pharisees, you know, have overly amplified it. They put it above God, but we buried it. And so I think it's time for us to now revive the Sabbath. We need to start practicing it on a weekly basis, because if we don't, we're going to be buried along with it, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this thought right now, that like, it's interesting that, you know, we're talking about, hey, you need to practice Sabbath. Like like, you know, the Sabbath is so important. Like if you don't practice it, you're missing out. Yeah. But then at the same time, it takes work to take a Sabbath.
It does.
It does. Like leading up to it, there's preparation that goes into it, right? If you're saying, hey, I'm going to protect the next 24 hours and not do any of the work that I could be doing in these 24 hours, like that means that you either need to get your work done before, or you need to push it to after. Yeah. And so, yeah, you're working so that you can make time for rest. Yes. But here's the thing, that if you never rest, then a time's going to come where like your work is just going to destroy you. So like you need the rest in order to work. Yeah. Yeah. So you're like working to rest and resting to work. Yes. Rather than just working. You know?
Yeah, when we sat down and were preparing, you were helping me prepare for my message. I like you mentioned something where you're like, you were discussing rest, right? And you're saying how, I don't know if we read it somewhere or you just mentioned it, where, you know, we need to find rest, because if we don't, then rest is going to find us. Yeah. And when you said that, I was just like, oh, I was like, dude, that was so good, because it's like, yeah, like we can keep going to the point where our body just completely collapse on us, and it's happened. I mean, my wife Sarah, that was you know, on the second week of this series, it's happened to her a couple times in the past, like where she'd overwork herself, and then there's just that day where she's like, I can't even get up right now, like I'm just gonna just lay here and catch it. And it's like, man, like that's a thing. Yeah. And it happens. So yeah, I think that was like a good thing that I got reminded of right now. I was like, if you don't find rest is gonna find you. And it's like, well, how would you rather have it, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, and with this podcast being a young adults ministry podcast, I think speaking to young adults in that of, there's this idea in the young adult mindset, right, that I am invincible, that nothing can touch me, nothing bad will happen to me, right?
Reality check, you are not. Yeah.
And like that, I think we think the same way. I mean, my body has made me slow down to a point, right? In just kind of aging, and I'm not even over 30, right? So like I'm already experiencing it just in my late 20s. Yeah. But I remember in my early 20s, like I would go and go, and I would just like sleep maybe 2 hours a night, right? And I'd just,
if that,
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine, right? I'm working.
Let's go on a hike. Come on, guys. Let's go. You need coffee? No, I'm good. I'm all right. Let's go.
I'm wired.
Yeah,
man.
I'm wired. What? You're not? Wait, come on, dude. Yeah.
There was a time, man. How many years ago would this be? Like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. A buddy of mine was getting married, and I was his best man in his wedding. So like, we had bachelor party weekend
responsibilities
planned,
right?
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like we got to get down there, and you know, we got to get like the house ready and everything, and like do all this stuff. And I had this final it was the week of finals. that the bachelor party was. And so I had this final paper for this like big important class that I needed to turn in.
Gosh.
And I didn't finish it until the night before I was supposed to leave.
Dude.
And so I stayed up that whole night. I pounded like 2 of those Bang energy drinks.
Oh, I remember those.
Stayed up that whole night, just wired, man, just at the computer, not leaving. And then the next day, I mean, we're at the bachelor party, and so like, you know, we're hanging out, we're having a good time, we're staying up. And so like I didn't sleep for like 72 hours. I was just like pounding energy drinks, just like trying to stay awake.
Crazy, dude.
And then like by the end of that weekend, my body was just like, you're done.
Yeah, that's
like,
it, bro.
You can't do this anymore, man. And so yeah, it just makes me think of, you know, we think we're indestructible. We think that like we can keep going.
Yeah.
But whether you like it or not, rest is gonna find you.
It's gonna find you, dude.
And you're probably not gonna like it when it does.
Yeah. It's funny. That kind of sounds like a scary movie plot. You know, rest is gonna find you. You can't hide from rest.
Yeah.
That's
rest always wins.
Rest always wins, dude. I mean, we could try to fight as much as we can, but rest is always gonna win. Yeah, man.
Because we need it. Because God created us
for sure. And that's why, again, it's a gift.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, it's a gift to practice Sabbath, to be in rest, and to just be with him in that. So, yeah, man, I mean, I think this series was just so needed, not only for like the young adults, but my gosh, it was needed for myself as well, dude. Like, just
absolutely.
Every message, like yours, Sarah's, shout out, which by the way, that's my wife. I don't know if you guys know that, but yeah,
shout out.
Yeah, shout out. But yeah, man, I feel like this series, I'm like, God, I didn't know I needed this, but you knew I did, and so thank you for that. Thank you for giving me this series, because my gosh, it was meant for each and every one of us sitting in there listening to it, and hopefully those of you who find it on YouTube and hear this podcast, I mean, hopefully, you know, it's something that you didn't know you needed, and now you do. So,
and I think one of the things that's going to help me keep this a rhythm of rest in my life is the accountability that I have from you, from the other leaders in the ministry, even just like from friends in my life who, you know, want to do this together. And so as we close out, we want to encourage you, hey, if you don't have a community that you can rest with or that will help keep you accountable, like, hey, come through Tuesday nights, VantagePoint Church, Eastvale.
Come on down.
Not the other one. But come through, man. We would love to just invite you into our community, be able to, you know, pray with you, seek God with you. That's really what it's all about. So follow us on Instagram at VantagePointYA. Check us out on YouTube, where you can find the video format of this, unless you're already watching. You can also find sermons on there, and hopefully some more fun stuff coming in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be really good.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.
We're out.